Hello and welcome back. Today on this rainy, gloomy, horrible day in March 2021 we're looking at the transformers for the 6146 amplifier, and as you can see I've painted them black. These are the output transformers. They don't look too bad. As you can see, I tried to cover them in masking tape to stop the bobbing and whatnot getting really black and horrible, with varying success. This masking tape really is shit, it doesn't stick. But anyway, they don't look too bad. This is the big main transformer, and that's not come out too bad. These are the, what do you call it, spacers that I made. I just made them out of, I think it's called particle board, and that hasn't done too bad. I covered the wires, just wrapped a twist of newspaper around. This one is the small transformer that I wound, and I screwed up on this one a little bit in that I tried painting it with some car underseal paint, and it just remained sticky. Just before I move on to the end bells, as you can see, this is the sort of band that goes around that other transformer that I wound. That's done quite good. I always find that matte paint comes out a lot better. These are the end bells. Painted them in green, and they've not turned out too bad. Now then, with painting amplifiers in the past, I've messed about for bloody ages trying, rubbing this down, messing about, trying to get a really good finish, trying to get a really shiny finish. This is gloss paint, some cheap gloss paint, spray can again. But I've just found, especially on something like this, you've got a lot of curved surfaces. If I start hitting that with some wet and dry, so the usual process is you use a really fine grade wet and dry, something like 1000 grit, with some warm water with a little bit of fairy liquid in it, detergent, and rub that down. What happens is, with these curved surfaces, that will just go straight through the primer, and you end up screwing up. So what's happened in the past, I've put the primer on, done that, tried to rub it down, gone through the bleeding primer and the top coat there, painted it again, rubbed it down, painted it again, rubbed it down, and just ended up going round and round and round in bloody circles. So I ain't gonna bother. These aren't too bad, so I'm just gonna leave them as they are. I know that if I start, I know from experience that if I start trying to sand these down and get a better finish, I just ended up going round in circles. I mean, for instance, on some amplifiers that I've painted, I've ended up spending literally weeks rubbing down, painting, so weeks and weeks of time, quite a lot of money on spray paint and all the rest of it. It ain't bleeding worth it. I'm happy with that. That don't look too bad. We haven't done so good with this. Hopefully you can see that. The surface is orange peely. We've got somewhere there's a run. I know the bloody well is there. There's a run there where I tried to just get the sides there. You see the sides? They're not quite covered in paint. So I'm just going to go through a few tips and tricks that I've found with using spray paint to paint amplifiers. Obviously, if you can afford to get it powder coated or stove enamelled or something like that, you've got the money, then go for it. I haven't. I'm building these amplifiers on a shoestring. So with anything, any job, the first thing is preparation. So with these, obviously I went round with a file, sandpaper and everything to make sure everything was smooth, and then I used 80 grit coarse sandpaper and went all over it. So that basically what I was trying to do was get a good key with this. The other thing I did, which is a tip I've picked up in the past, I went round with a file and I knocked off all the 90-degree corner, angles off the sides here, because what I found in the past is you get all this nice, and again if you start to try and sand this, all the edges will come off and the paint doesn't adhere to these 90-degree edges as well. So what I did, I went round with a file and just put a 45-degree angle, and then I went round with the 80 grit over it again, and the file I used is quite a coarse file, and I didn't bother smoothing that down anymore. I just left it quite scratchy surface. So that's the preparation started. Once I got it all cushy, I then went over with, I said, the 80 grit, and then I used this stuff, which is bright spark. I think it's just ether or acetone sort of mixture. Put that on and went with a rag and cleaned it all off so there was no grease. And then I made sure obviously there was no dust on there or anything like that. Went over it with a lint free cloth. Then I put on, where are we? I put on 3 coats of this etch primer. Then I put a coat of this just normal grey primer on there. And then I didn't bother rubbing it down between coats or anything like that. Then I applied this green paint. The green paint is cheap stuff from a local sort of like equivalent to Woolworths. It's about £4 a can, really cheap stuff. And yeah, it doesn't do too bad a job. But again, it's gloss. If I could have done, I would have got a matte finish. So went over it with that. The trick to spray painting is, I've found, for a start, I've got a open fire in the living room there. So I put these not right next to the fire, but in the same room, so it's quite warm, and I put the paint in the same room. It actually tells you on the can not to paint it, it tells you to paint at room temperature. So basically the metal and the paint is at the same temperature. Then you follow the instructions on the can basically. So you shake it for a good minute to make sure that all the colour or whatever is distributed evenly throughout the sort of spraying on medium stuff. And then spray it. Start with a big flat surface like this. I used to spray it like this down and ended up getting into trouble. So what I do now, I spray it upright with a bit of wood just holding it off the door, obviously with a bit of newspaper at the back of it to stop it going everywhere. Spray it and then just leave it alone. You don't go near it. I've tried spraying outside in the past, but you end up with bugs on it, bits of dust, all sorts of crap. So spraying doors. The problem with that is obviously the fumes. The fumes are hideous, especially this green stuff. This is really nasty stuff. The primer isn't too bad if you spray and then sort of open a door or window or whatever. It's not too bad. This stuff is horrible. As soon as you sprayed it, you can feel your lungs, you know, sort of clogging up, and you start getting headaches, and that's even with a mask on. So it's fucking idiot stuff. So obviously ventilation is crucial. I've mentioned temperature, I've mentioned preparation, and I think that's about it. Oh yeah, and the other thing is to be patient. Depending on what paint you use, some of it says like it dries pretty much quick, you know, within like what, 10 minutes, even less than that for some of the primers. But the thing I found to do is to leave it a good 24 hours in a warm sort of place to allow it to dry thoroughly and properly. before putting any, you know, another coat on. When I've rubbed this down and painted this, I'm going to leave it for a week. I ain't going to touch it for a week. I'm just going to put it somewhere and forget about it to make sure that the paint is absolutely cured, because if you're not careful, you go a bit too quickly and the bloody paint will just come off. Right, is there anything else I forgot to mention? Oh right, yeah, I know what I meant to mention. Every spray can comes with a different nozzle. We've got various ones here, and each nozzle has a different spray pattern. The ones for the the ones for the primer, if you look, I've got a sort of sticky, let's do it over there. The ones for the primer, if you look, have got a bit sticking out, and the spray comes out in a horizontal sheet. Not too bad. I prefer this type. These types here, this is another sort of type where you've just got like a sort of hole, a fine hole, or not so good. The one that came with the green can is shit. It sort of came out as a vertical spray, and I didn't like that at all. So if you can, over the sort of, I don't know, you know how many years you like painting, save the nozzles and try different nozzles on different cans to get your finish. And obviously it's a good idea to spray a test piece first. The other thing with spray painting is distance and time. So as you're spraying, the time that you take from going across like that, you have to get that right. It's hard to tell you how to do that. It's hard to explain how to do that. You just get a feel for it. The other thing is distance. It tells you usually on the can about distance, but you might have to experiment with that. If you get too close, you'll get too much paint on and it'll drip. You're too far away and it starts, you know, you don't get enough on. It's usually about a foot or 12 inches, which is, where are we, from this can, about that far. You might just have to go backwards and forwards to get that right. So yeah, it's all about time, how quickly you go across. Take your time, but obviously don't put too much on. Obviously when you get to the edges, you've got to be careful, because you're coming across here and you're going up, and you're basically just trying to keep that sort of paint creeping up nice and slowly. But with the edges, if you're not careful, you're here and then you go back across, you can apply too much paint there. So it's probably a good idea just to go a little bit quicker on the edge there, and then take your time and then a little bit quicker, because you're coming back on yourself, you see. Oh, another thing I meant to mention is that when you're done spray painting, put some isopropyl or whatever, give it a squirt inside the nozzle. Come on, you bagger. To keep the nozzle clear, because if you're not careful, when you come to use it next time, if you don't clean it out, it'll be clogged up and you'll just get loads of blobs of paint. So I give it a squirt with this bright spot stuff, isopropyl, use thinners, meths, whatever. Just make sure that when you come to spray next time, you just give it a few squirts on some paper to get rid of any thinners that's in there. So yeah, clean your nozzles. I usually keep them in a jar with some thinners in. All the iron, all the transformers of various descriptions are, you know, the shrouds are painted, and I am quite happy. Yeah, I'm quite chuffed with the result. It's not 100%. I can see a few little niggles there. Got a dink, well, sort of bit of, what do you call it? Not underseal, undercoat. Not undercoat, primer showing through there. Got a scratch there. Bits and bobs. Yeah, look, a few little sort of see, I don't, it's hard to see whether you can see what I can see. A bit of a blemish there. Yeah, a bit of a dink there, look. This one, yeah. But on the whole, yeah, I'm quite happy with that. There's the 4 octal bases on, but that was a bloody struggle. And yeah, we've got dinks and bloody scratches all over the freaking shop. Grown. Well, there's all the transformers on top of the chassis. Sides on. Temporary front on. Main switch fitted. Put a bit of, what do you call it, Danish oil on the woodwork. Blah blah blah. We've got a few dinks and scratches in places, but I can go round later with a touch up, you know, with a little brush and touch that up. Did have one problem. If you look there, I don't know if you can see. We have got one problem, or we did have one problem with that. We did have one problem, and I don't know if you can see there, the laminations are running downhill there. It's not quite square. They were a lot worse, and so basically I took the transformer apart and rebuilt it. The problem was, with those laminations being uneven, it was throwing out the feet, it's throwing out the end barrels, throwing out the feet. As a result, it was skewing the chassis a bit. So we'll move on now to me taking the transformer apart. Right, as you can see, I've got the big mains transformer in bits again, because if you can see there, the laminations are trapezoid in shape rather than square. Just jigging the camera about, it's not square. So from an aesthetic point of view, it's wrong, but not much copper at all. So I'm going to try gently smacking the fuck out of it, and we'll see how we get on. So first we'll try my big mallet. If all else failed, I've got my number 5 twatting hammer. It's a big heavy engineering jobby. And we'll try gently with this first. I won't film it because it doesn't make very good TV, I don't think. Well, I tried clunking it with a big hammer. Tried using clamps. No go. So now I'm going to rebuild it. So what I'm going to do is obviously take it apart. It's using a butter knife, an old butter knife. It's got quite a sharp edge. Just to where are we? Just to split the laminations like so. Just get in there with the butter knife, and then they should come out relatively easy. It won't take long, it'll take about an hour or something. After removing a good few of the laminations, you can see they've not been put in square. Well, I hope you can see that. That is at an angle, quite a big angle. So whether that's because the bobbin's too small or what, I don't know. I'm hoping that we can put that back together and put it in a lot squarer. We'll see. So nearing the end now of stacking these laminations. As you can see, I've stacked it on a piece of plywood to keep it square, and hopefully we're square with the bobbin, though it's a bit hard to tell because the bobbin's a bit, how you doing, but we're getting there. Not long now. Here we are again, trying to make a mounting bracket type thing for the caps. So we've got a plate in there. Caps, the idea is that the caps sit like that, and then I'm just cutting out some, take this out, just cutting out some slots, or trying to. I've just drilled, chain drilled them. Then I'm going to get a file and clean that up if I've got one that's thin enough. And then the idea is, where is it? Where? Well, the idea is anyway to cut out some thinner alley, make bands, and the bands will go over. Bands will go over the top of the caps, and then we'll just fold them over, maybe put a bolt through them, although I don't think that will be necessary, and that should hold them in place. Well, that's the capacitor oldery thingy doodah done. It's not very neat here, but I mean they're in there, they ain't coming out. And that's the progress on the underside. Moving on, we've got the capacitors secured. They ain't coming anywhere. Not such a neat job as I would like to have done. A neater job, but nobody's gonna see it, so yeah, but I'll know about it. But it's done. We can't sod about like for hours messing about. As long as it's a good secure job, then that's fine. Cut some of the wires there to the output transformer number 1, output transformer number 2. Tidied the wiring up. This is our, what is that? That's a HT, a main HT goes there, so that will go to a bridge rectifier and a choke and those caps. Over here we've got, I've lost the video actually, I did a video. What this is it's the gubbins to control the constant current source for the cathode follower, and it's also the to alter the bias for the cathode follower. So that basically sets all the operating conditions for this cathode follower, which drives the output stage. We've got a couple of 100k little presets to set the bias on the control grid, and then we've got these two 1k pots, which are 1k, and they've got a 1k across them, so they're basically sort of set to 500 ohm, and that we can adjust the constant current. That will adjust the constant current. Yeah, that's right. We've got a main switch fitted. We've got our big transformer wired in and our small transformer wired in. We just need to wire in the mains. We've got this is a Valve Wizard power supply board. It's really designed for a guitar amp. I'm not going to use it for our main HT, I'm going to use it for our screen grid supply, power supply, a humdinger humbucker for the, what do you call it, sorry, a bit late at night. I'm going to use it for a humdinger for the heaters for the 5 small valves at the front. And then I'm going to try and fettle it so that we've got our negative bias supply on there as well. Lastly, we've got our back plate halfway. We've got our back plate, all the various holes drilled, so we've got the choke mounted on there. We've got our IEC main socket with a mains fuse, and these are temporary, what do you call it, speaker terminals. Actually, they're not too bad. They're new old stock sort of thing. They've got a really good spring on them, but I've just put those in temporary because I haven't got the cash at the moment to buy some speaker terminals. So that will fit in there. As you can see, we're all ready to wire it up. That will go over there to our mains switch. And so we're just about ready to get one side, or at least get one side of the output stage working. So yeah, I'm quite happy with the progress I made. It took a while getting there, but you know, these things take time. Anyway, with that, I think that covers just about everything. Thank you again very much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and ta-ra for now.